everybody. This is Bonnie Vandermeulen, Training Coordinator for Wisconsin Facets. On behalf of our entire Wisconsin Facets staff, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar is entitled Understanding Accessible Educational Materials. Our presenters today are Amy Snow and Stacy Duffy. Stacy Duffy is an accomplished special education teacher and transition coordinator with a master's degree in special education. She serves as the co-manager of the Assistive Technology Forward Project and is the director for the Wisconsin Accessible Educational Materials Center. She brings an extensive background in special education with an emphasis on inclusion education and improving post-secondary outcomes for students with IEPs. Amy Snow is an assistive technology instructional specialist at the Wisconsin Center for the Blind and the Visually Impaired, where she has been employed for 19 years. She graduated from Northern Illinois University as a teacher for the blind and visually impaired and pursued her certificate as a specialist in AT for the blind and visually impaired. She manages the WCBVI's assistive technology loan library and assists teachers around the state with learning and using screen readers, braille displays, and other specialized technology for the blind. Amy lives in Janesville with 3 most spoiled felines in Wisconsin. It gives me great pleasure today to introduce to you Stacy Duffy and Amy Snow. Ladies.
Thank you, Bonnie. And welcome to our webinar, Understanding Accessible Educational Materials. And from this point on, we're going to refer to those as AEM, capital AEM, just to center our learning today. As Bonnie mentioned, I am Stacy Duffy, and I am the Assistive Tech Project Co-Manager and also the Wisconsin AEM Center Director. In addition to those responsibilities, I also work for CISA 2. I am the transition specialist. I do a lot of consulting work around co-teaching and some co-plan, co-serve work, and also involved with the nonviolent crisis intervention training. And I'm really excited to have Amy here with me today.
Hi, I'm Amy Snow. I'm a certified assistive technology instructional specialist, and I work at the Wisconsin Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired, specializing in technology specifically for students who are blind and visually impaired.
Excellent. So for today, our learning outcomes, I will develop an awareness of the legal requirements around AEM. I will understand the IEP team decision-making process for when a student qualifies for AEM. I will learn about resources available to acquire AEM in a timely manner. And I will understand where to find next step learning opportunities around AEM. And to sort of center our learning for today, when you hear the word accessible, what does that mean to you? Just in general, when you hear that word accessible, what does that mean to you? And if you're comfortable, you can put that in the chat. Otherwise, you can think about that. I'll give you a little bit of time for silent reflection. When you hear accessible, what does that mean to you? As we move into our presentation today, we're going to start with sort of defining AEM, so you can get a baseline understanding of AEM and also what a print disability is, because that will frame the rest of our presentation and our thinking around this topic. So the National AEM Center defines AEM as print and technology-based educational materials, including printed and electronic textbooks, and related core materials that are designed or enhanced in a way that makes them usable across the widest range of learner variability, regardless of format. And really that key word is usable, which we'll come back to momentarily. Next, we're going to watch, when we think about accessible education materials, we're going to talk about students with a print disability. And we're going to go right now to a video to sort of introduce that topic from David Rose, who is the CAST, the Center for Applied Special Technology. He's a scientist there, and he's leading a seminar, and he just has a great way of defining what that is and to help us all understand what a print disability is. So I'm going to pull that video up.
what is the difference between a print disability and a learning disability? You're all familiar with learning disabilities and all sorts of things, but there's something very different about the word print disability. So we're sort of big for this, but let me just see if someone would venture what's so important and what's so different about this new term print disabilities that's very different than learning disabilities, emotional disabilities, any of those kinds of things. What's the big change? Anybody? I know it's a big audience, and so way in the back. Great. Can you shout? Great. Perfect. It puts the medium as part of the disability and points to the medium and says, print is part of what's going on here. And I forget the second part of your sentence. And say it again, your second part. Right, rather than the internal. It says it's not in the kid, it's in the interaction between the kid and something else, print. In this regard, it's much more like allergies, okay? That it's something between you and ragweed or dust or whatever. And, but it's a very different concept to say you have ragweed, because then say you have allergies, because there's two things you can do. One is you can treat the internal condition sometimes. The other is to get rid of the ragweed or the dust or whatever it is, okay? And this is what this change is about, to say, you know what? Print can be an allergen. There are some kids for whom print is not a good medium at all. And rather than say they have an internal problem, they have a problem in the way they relate to the environment of print, okay?
So I thought David does a nice job of providing that analogy to an allergen when we think about wrapping our heads around what is a print disability. And in the slide that I have up there, you see the goal being the learning target, the learning intention, the learning standard. And then you look at that text, and the text is blurred and is truly the barrier to that student accessing not only the curriculum, but also the assessments, their goals. Print that in itself of that medium is the barrier. And so for students that have a print disability, they are eligible to receive, again, accessible educational materials, that acronym that you see, AIM. And so to qualify to receive AIM, we talk about who is eligible. So in the first category, where you see by letter A, if the individual is blind. Okay, under B, you see the individual has a visual impairment or perceptual or reading disability. And that is really, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but the idea that the student cannot decode or decode at grade level or read fluently at grade level, they would be eligible for print disability, which we'll get into shortly here. And category C is they're otherwise unable through physical disability to hold or manipulate a book or to be able to move their eyes to the extent that would be normally acceptable for reading. In your copy of the slide deck, you will find DPI has updated their bulletin, and I just want to highlight this as a resource for you where this language came from. And so that is there. It is, again, in your slide deck, and I would recommend all participants take the time to read that bulletin as it's been updated. One of the updates is when we talk about AIM is who can certify eligibility. And again, you see the disability categories for the print disabilities labeled on the left-hand side. So visual impairment, a physical disability, which affects the ability to hold and turn pages, or the learning disability that affects the ability to read standard print. And then on the right-hand column, you see the certifying professionals. I want to take the time to point out that added into this, you'll see a special education teacher. So it is so important that we as IEP teams are meeting and having these conversations to recognize that in addition to, you know, doctors, physical therapists, that special education teachers can also certify eligibility around AIM. So if you are in the world of special education and have been in an IEP meeting, you likely have seen revised language, and I'm going to say revised language around the prompt for AIM. This has always been there. This is nothing new for IEP teams to talk about. This is, in fact, like I mentioned, it's always been there, but it is now brought to the forefront a little bit more because there are a huge group of students with whom we need to consider print disability, and DPI has moved this sub-question, and the question reads, is a student able to access, use, and derive meaning from age or grade level standard printed text? So again, if you've been involved in an IEP meeting since the start of the year, you've likely noticed this. And so again, which is good because the intent is to bring this to the forefront for IEP teams. So when we talk about a print disability, again, we're looking at those indicators. The student cannot decode letters and words at or near grade level. The student cannot read with fluency at or near grade level. The student cannot see the information, or the student cannot hold and manipulate the pages. So those are the indicators. And if it's true, any one of those statements is true, then the student would qualify for AIM. So if the student cannot decode letters and words at or near grade level, the IEP team has that conversation and it's made that determination, then that student would qualify for AIM. I'm going to point out another resource for you. The WCAS guide for IEP teams supporting students with print disabilities is a fantastic resource. This one was last published in 2019, but there's an updated guide that's in the works that will be coming out too. So if you're as part of this, and again, we can only have time for an overview today, but if you are interested in finding out more information, including how to include AIM writing in the IEP, where do we document it, that type of thing, there's also supports for that in that document. So just, it's a huge wealth of information in that guide. So I wanted to take the time to point that out. As we can move forward with this, really, really excited about the resources that are coming out from Wisconsin's Department of Public Instruction. The first being, there is an AIM decision tree which will be available for IEP teams. So if you're a parent at the meeting, you're a student, you're the special education teacher, case manager, whatever role you're in and you're supporting this IEP team, there will be a decision tree, and it's a nice one-page document to kind of walk through those questions that we talked about in this previous slide, looking at these print disability indicators and helping guide the teams to make that determination. So if you're sitting here saying, I'm brand new to AIM, I don't really even know where to start, these resources are coming soon. I know the goal for the decision tree is to be out published next month. And in addition to that decision tree, there's also a next step guidance document that says, okay, yes, the IEP team has made this decision that the student qualifies for AIM. Now what do we do? What does the law require? What do we do next? In addition to that, the DPI will also be including a website devoted solely to AIM. It'll be under the Assistive Tech umbrella, and so there'll be resources there. And I also want to take a minute to point out, we are also launching an AIM webinar series that breaks down each of these components around AIM. So the first is AIM in Wisconsin, Are You Ready? And you can find the details on this on slide 38. We'll talk about them at the end. It's just kind of an overview of what AIM is and why it's important that we have it. Because again, we talk about the why. If print is the barrier, then that student is not accessing, right, the grade level content, the standard, the assessment, right, really is a key to students engaging with, accessing with the curriculum and all those areas. So again, it's just so important as we talk about inclusive practices that we have this focus on AIM. Then we talk about providing AIM, what type of AIM is needed. So recognizing that different students are going to need different features. And so we'll talk, Amy will talk a little bit more about that as we get to our section, but there'll be a whole webinar devoted just to that. How do you acquire and use materials in your system? And how do you progress monitor for AIM? So those will be coming, and again, I'll talk a little more about those at the end. So as the IEP team goes through, the determination has been made that the student qualifies for AIM, we say, what now? And what IDEA requires is when the team determines there's a print disability, IDEA requires that they receive the materials in a timely manner, which is at the same time as the materials are provided to peers, that they are in accessible format and usable for the individual, that there's instruction for use for the student, and also training for staff and families. And we talk about accessible formats, and you can see the official definition here as described by the law is an alternative manner or form that gives an eligible person access to the work when the copy or phonorecord in the accessible format is used exclusively by the eligible person to permit the individual to have access as feasibly and comfortably as a person without such disability. And I think that's where we really talk about the accessible format. Again, have access as feasibly and comfortably as a person without such a disability. And that's where we really, and Amy will get into some of that conversation in the next portion of our time together. And I've also included a link there from the National AIM Center about accessible formats to kind of guide you through there. And I recognize, again, this is a lot of information that you are receiving. And again, just as a sort of overview of what the law requires, you know, what it is a print disability. So as we move through, we are going to pause for questions after this next section here, or if this next slide. So if you have a question that you want to follow up with, certainly you can stick it into the chat. In addition, again, we'll have those follow-up learning opportunities because we're just sort of scratching the surface today and bringing awareness to AIM. So as we talk about acquiring AIM after the student has qualified with a print disability, we really look at it that school districts can acquire AIM through the nonprofit accessible media producers. You may have heard the acronym AMPS, AMPS, and those would include like Bookshare, Learning Ally, and Louis Database. And they operate in the United States under that copyright exemption, and they're able to make books available to individuals with a print disability. You can obtain them directly from publishers, and then also through the NIMAC, which is the National Instructional Materials Accessibility Center. And you do that by going through the Wisconsin AIM Center or the Wisconsin Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired AIM Center. And I know this looks like a lot, and in a moment we're going to take each of these and kind of go through what is Bookshare, what is Learning Ally, what is Louis Database, then we're going to talk about the AIM Center and the WCBVI AIM Center. So I do want to pause for questions if we have any at this time.
We do have a couple. One is that it's really exciting to have the AEM materials available and discussing at IEP meetings, but I'm not sure if all those that are involved in IEPs, says our questioner, will have this knowledge. How is this knowledge being brought to the schools and to the teachers?
That's a great question. So thank you for that question, first of all. So in a couple of manners. Number one, again, the publication of that AIM decision tree will be available to every IEP team to help them guide through, and as well as that next step document. So if I'm brand new to AIM, that's going to be a great spot to start. However, as we really want to think about like a systems approach and getting like the whole district wide on board, we are also doing outreach to the directors through their different CISAs. So as we're doing the RSN meetings there to reach out to directors and get them on board too, right? As we want to consider this as a system wide, and actually that third webinar that we're doing on DPI focuses on that. So we're really trying to bring a lot of outreach, and those webinars that I mentioned are free as well, and they're open to anybody in the state. That'll be a virtual format, which we'll talk about, but great question.
Okay, and the other question that I have is that, is there a cost to requesting things like Bookshare and Learning Ally?
This is a great segue to Amy. We're going to talk about that because there are Bookshare, there's no fee for, which she'll get into for school districts, and she'll talk about also really just from a transition lens too. We talk about how are we preparing students to be independent, to be self-advocates, to be able to access these, like for example, Bookshare can stay with you especially if you're in a post-secondary education setting, that remains free to the individual. And then there's just a nominal cost if they're not. But again, how can we prepare students? So that's a great segue to this, because Amy is going to guide us through the next piece here and look at all of those regarding Bookshare, Learning Ally, and Louis.
Oh, I do have another question. Do you want me to do that now or hold it for next?
Let's go ahead and take it, and then we'll turn it over to Amy.
Okay. Is AIM appropriate for students that struggle with language and reading comprehension?
So really, when you go back through, IEP teams really need to look at those print disability indicators are firm in what they are. It's such an individual basis for each student. So if decoding or fluency is the issue, then yes, the team could make the determination that they qualify. But again, it's based on that IEP team discussion, their disability related needs, and the team to work through that.
And just
want to be clear, sorry. That when we talk, because AIM in and of itself, right, when we think about, I'm just going to just for a moment here, when you think about any given learning target or learning standard, if the skill is not like just this universally for all students, right, if the learning target isn't about the skill of decoding, right, we think about things from a universal design for learning, that UDL approach, right, and removing barriers for all students. So that's not to be said too that the students couldn't benefit from some of those universal tools, right? It's like the read and writes, those other tools. But what we're talking about today is specifically for students who have been identified with a print disability. So, and that's where we get into Bookshare, Learning Ally, and Louis are solely for those students. That is not a UDL type tool.
okay, thank you. I think that's it for now.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thanks, Stacy. So that's, yeah. So let's talk about what some of these AMPs are and what they do, and some advantages and maybe some things to think about when you're signing up to use them. So the first one we're going to talk about is Bookshare. Bookshare is an AMP that provides books in, now I see that your screen is not, was reading off of it, Stacy. I have no idea where you went. Okay. Good thing I have this up here. Okay.
I've got it. I'm pulling it back up. I apologize, Amy. I'm not sure what happened.
No problem. It freaked me out for a second. I thought, what did I do wrong?
Yep. I'm just going to pull it back up. So just one moment.
It's okay. It's okay. Any questions while we troubleshoot our tech issues?
Just that I think at the very beginning when you asked for, people to comment where it said, when you're talking about universal design, they talked about that they believed that was appropriate for all learners, that everyone could access the information, that they could see and that they can hear and they can feel.
It's all about learning modalities. Everybody has a different way of learning, and they talk to you about it in like teacher school. They talked about how important it is to make sure that you're offering your instruction across different modalities so that students with different strengths can access it. I see we're still having some difficulty here. Should I go ahead, Stacy, and read from?
Yeah, go ahead with it. I'm trying to pull it up. I'm not sure why it's not.
Okay,
so.
No worries. Okay, so anyway, let's just kind of segue back here. So Bookshare, the books are offered as usually as text files or DAISY files, and those files can be navigated like by chapter, by page, using various readers. These are usually text to speech, so they're provided as like written text, and they're usually not human readers, but it's something that they're beginning to offer now as human readers, a little bit more based on the book. So what's interesting is it's great because Bookshare books, depending on the app that you have, you can, if the teacher says turn to page 64, you're able to turn to page 64 in your Bookshare book. There you can navigate by chapter, page, section, all of that stuff. Students who qualify for Bookshare can be added to either an organizational membership that's kept by your school or your CISA or your district, and added to that organization, or the student can apply for their own Bookshare membership. As long as they are a student, whether it's in a K-12 setting or a post-secondary setting, as long as they are a student, they will receive Bookshare as a free service, and it's paid for by I believe, the U.S. Department of Education, as long as, again, they are qualifying. after they graduate, or if they choose to maintain a membership, that's possible to do. I believe it's a small fee. It's like $50 a year, which, believe you me, is pretty nominal if you talk about how many books that you can access, especially if your student is an avid reader and enjoys reading for pleasure. Bookshare is a great option. Bookshare also has a variety of titles within that pleasure reading sphere. So are we back on this?
Can you see okay on the screen? I think it's resolved.
Okay. Yep, I see now.
And,
Okay.
and everybody else can see as well. So we're doing fine.
Excellent. So I'm feeling very successful. Good job, guys. So the student must have a documented disability, which Stacy talked about earlier. But the disability can be blindness, a learning disability, or some sort of physical limitation. The students may have both of the accounts that I talked about before. They can have an organizational account through their school and an individual account. There is an advantage to that. Being able to keep the two separate is important, and also being able to access that account after they graduate, or stop receiving services through special education. It's important to have that individual membership established, because when they go to college, or if they do pursue some post-secondary thing, they will have access to that account, and they will have an uninterrupted experience. It also allows you to begin practicing to use the account with the student. So they begin to start practicing to get their own materials, to facilitate that independence and have them learn along the way. So next slide. Okay, accessing Bookshare content. There are a lot of ways to access Bookshare content, and I was telling Stacy and Bonnie before the webinar started that we've already had a bit of a change to how you can access some content through Bookshare. They have updated their web reading tool, and I'm going to really quick put a link in the chat to the new book reading tool. It's the new web reader that it has the tool built into the browser. So these resources here on this particular slide are still relevant. The web reader will look just a little different than it would if you were looking at these resources. So definitely make sure to look at the one that I placed in the chat. That is bookshare.org. And if you go to the Help Center and the Learning Center, there's a how-to guide to use the new web reader, the browser reader. They actually have a pretty prominent thing on the homepage of Bookshare that will take you to this guide as well. So just as a heads up, there's a nice resource that they have, so many ways to read. It's a downloadable PDF, and it talks about the various ways you can access Bookshare. Like we've talked about, the web reader is one way, and here are all of these demonstrations on how you can access that web reader. And then to the next slide. There's other ways. So if you have a tablet or an iPad or something like that, a smart device, you can use iBooks. You can use another app is called Capty. You can use, my personal favorite is VoiceStream Reader. You can use Dolphin Easy Reader. Read2Go is another one that's they kind of don't support that one very much. And there's Go Read if you use Android, and these are all these different resources that you'll have access to. They're also available on Bookshare themselves. My understanding is that Bookshare will be coming out with its own dedicated app sometime in this fall, probably leading into winter. So if you aren't interested in accessing it through these apps, I'm really kind of looking forward to seeing what this new Bookshare app will look like and what kinds of modifications or what kinds of things it offers. So if we go to the next slide. So there's a lot of getting started resources for Bookshare. There's some general resources. They have a great training library. If you have any questions at all, and they address it somewhere. They have great resources, and their customer service team is phenomenal. I have never called and not had someone be able to help me. It's been great. I've called as both a teacher and as a patron, because I have a visual impairment and qualify for Bookshare. And I actually am not a student anymore, unless you call it student of life. School of Hard Knocks, who knows? So I'm not a student anymore, but I have a Bookshare account, and I've called as both a patron and as a teacher, and I've had really good experiences with them. Educators can call, and there's like some getting started resources if you're an educator, if you're a special ed teacher, and how to get, you know, individual memberships for students. There's some really good resources there, and some other really good resources for individual memberships here, like how you apply to be to have your own personal Bookshare account, and how you submit what's called proof of disability. So you can't just say, hey, I have a disability, and they believe you. We talked about having certifying people. This gives you some detail on how to submit that proof, and you have a window of time that you can submit it. It's not like they give you 24 hours, and if you don't, you know, you have to have that to access it. But they are very open and let you know that they're waiting for it, or it's pending, or they're waiting to review it. So we can go ahead to the next one.
Amy, would I just be able to jump in just for, especially if you're brand new to AIM and this, you're like, whoa, this kind of feels like a lot. I can tell you from, so Bookshare, like especially if you're in a school district role, for those that are here supporting that, you have your district account, you're signed up, and it's very quick and easy. And as Amy alluded to, the resource library is awesome. They have like an ABCs for educator, what do I need to know? And so the district gets an account, teachers sign up, and then if the student is going through the district account, you have students listed, and you literally just click you search for the title, and you literally, it's just clicking boxes and hit assign, and then the student has access to it. And through those methods that Amy showed, how the student can, depending on what type of device they're utilizing. So it's really, really user friendly and very efficient as well. So I just kind of wanted to point that out, because sometimes we see all this, it can feel overwhelming, but it really is a very simplified process. So for example, if a student is in geometry and you look up the name of their textbook, there's the geometry, there's the title of it, you find the student's name, you literally click the student and hit assign, right? So, and
it
then,
shows right up on their bookshelf. They don't have to look for it.
absolutely.
They go to their bookshelf and it's right there.
Yeah, it really could not be easier process. So yeah. And two, we had a question come in earlier this year just about checking to ensure the workbook for that particular, like when a district contact about if the workbook was included in the file, and it was. But if that's a situation where it's not, you can contact Bookshare directly. As Amy mentioned, they have a great support team there to answer. So it really is a very simplified process that way. And if you're not sure where to start and you're an educator, I would start with your director of pupil service, your director of special education, start there. And to start, that would be your conversation to have, and then having them create the district account or an individual create that.
And a lot of districts or schools, their media center has that. It kind of depends on how the district is choosing to manage it. Every district is going to be maybe a little different, but they can always direct you. So that brings us to Learning Ally, which is another resource. It's similar to Bookshare in that it does have those two components. The one major difference, actually, I guess I lied. There's two major differences. Learning Ally books are read by live readers. Some books, which is really kind of funny, they do have some that have a text component, and they can have a live reader while there's a highlight going across the screen. So that's really super cool. They do have live readers for long books. This is the part that's funny, is sometimes if you have like a geometry textbook or some sort of a textbook in Learning Ally, it's really super lengthy. So sometimes, like in the middle of a chapter, or even, you know, in the middle of a book or whatever, you'll change readers. You'll be maybe a younger female, and all of a sudden you have an older male. And that's partly because they have some volunteers, and they also have some that they do pay, but it's hard to find one person that's willing to read an entire history book, you know, that kind of thing. So a lot of times you're going to have that happen. And so that can sometimes throw students. So I do like to make sure to mention it just as a heads up, like, hey, you know, you might start out with Sally, but you might end up with Ron, you know, by the end of the book. The live readers are really good. They do try to pick live readers that have a familiarity with the subject matter so that they're pronouncing things correctly. I think that's very important. Books are also, just like the Bookshare books, they're navigable by page, chapter, section, all that stuff, depending on how you're accessing it. The Learning Ally library does contain mainly textbooks and some academic titles and stuff like that, but it also has some classic novels, and it also tends to, now they have a lot more like popular recreational reading that might appear in language arts classes, or that might be popular for students to kind of engage them. Another important point about Learning Ally that I think is important to make, Learning Ally is a paid service. So your district would be paying for an organizational membership, or your student would receive an individual paid membership. This is where it's important to ensure that your aim is in your IEP, because it is a paid service and you do need to have that so that it's sort of you're crossing your I's and dotting your T's, or dotting your I's and crossing your T's, depending on how you're looking at it. Okay. Just like Bookshare, the student must have a documented print disability, just like usual. Unlike Bookshare, we talked about the cost, and we talked about the institutional memberships. Like Stacy was saying earlier about Bookshare, the institutional memberships are really nice. You can assign books in much the same way you do with Bookshare. You can have different teachers in the school have access to the same student, so the different teachers of different subject matter can be assigning books to them and helping them keep track of their bookshelves. So that's kind of a nice feature. So accessing the Learning Ally content is very, very similar to Bookshare. It's got the same sort of methods. For example, there's, okay, go ahead and go back, I'm sorry. There you go. So on the iPad and or on a tablet, there's a Learning Ally link app that you can access. It's an official app. Learning Ally does tend to have more of your official app because, again, it's a dedicated paid service. On a Mac or a PC in Windows, there's something called Learning Ally Link that you can download. Mac and Chrome also has similar options. So now we can go ahead to the next one. Okay, so some general resources here. Learning Ally, some general options: who qualifies, how to get started, some frequently asked questions, and Teacher Ally memberships and links here. These might answer some of your questions here. Getting started with Teacher Ally, how to get started as an educator, all of that good stuff is in here. So go ahead. Say for individuals and families, so some people may choose to purchase a membership for their student outside of an IEP, or they may choose to purchase a membership if their student is homeschooled, or if their student attends like something that is not a public school. You can do individuals and families, and these are great resources for people at home to learn how to access these Learning Ally resources and how to help your student to get access to AIM. This next one is not so much an AMP as it is a database, and it can be used by anybody, but it has been made specifically for people who have vision impairments or utilize Braille. And the reason I bring that up is because this LUI database is through the American Printing House for the Blind, and it contains information on accessible materials that are produced by over 75 organizations throughout the United States and Canada. This includes vendors that do Braille textbooks and things like that. So I just mention it because when you go to look for something in LUI database, it covers searching in Bookshare and Learning Ally and a whole bunch of other vendors that, unless your student is a Braille reader, they're not going to worry too much about. You're not going to really be too concerned with. So the aim is to provide the maximum visibility for accessible educational materials, and to meet this goal, the search also includes information from these national repositories, and that's where the Bookshare and Learning Ally come in. The search features are great. You can search by ISBN, title, author, or keyword. So you can also narrow your search, which is really cool. You can narrow it by APH provided materials, by the NIMAC, by recreational reading, so reading type, by the format. So if you were looking for a Braille book, you could narrow to get searches for Braille books only. Even the type of Braille, and those of you who aren't aware, there are different types of Braille codes, UEB, eBay, single-sided Braille, double-sided Braille. Believe me, there's choices. So there's all of that. You can look by publisher or location, all of that stuff, and what library it's in. So it's one of those things that's like super, you have to get into it and play with it, but it is super neat. Each record in the database has the AMP that houses it. So whether it's from Bookshare or Learning Ally or another one, the format that it's in, Braille, large print, audio, etc. It has the ISBN, it has the reading level, which is really kind of nice. And it also has contact information for the agency. So again, if you are looking, this is probably the most important for Braille, really, because Braille you need to buy from a vendor usually, and that can get to be a process. So it's important to have that vendor's contact information. The last one I'm going to talk about is not necessarily an AMP. It's not like an official media producer for AIM, but it provides AIM. It's called Wisconsin Talking Book and Braille Library. The Wisconsin Talking Book and Braille Library's website contains a lot of useful information, including the application, information on services provided, and access to the online catalog. You do need to meet eligibility criteria to access the Wisconsin Talking Book and Braille Library, excuse me. It's not going to show up in the LUI database, so it's important to know that you're going to need to go directly to the resources listed here. The books are performed by live readers, and what's super cool is many books are commercial audiobooks that have been already recorded through like Audible or Penguin Random House, or I can't even think of all of them, just tons of them. And they're commercial audiobooks that the United States government has under contract because, think about it, if they're already recorded for the general public, then why is somebody going to read the same book and waste their time if it's already available? It's basically a money saver. And if you're a patron, you really get the benefit. And let me tell you, I read probably 250 books a year just using this service. The majority books on this are recreational reading, but some are classic novels. There's some cookbooks. I saw one on how to knit. There are not really any textbooks here, but this does help your student. It fosters their love of learning in a lot of ways, because they're getting material that's read by a real person, that they're doing it for, honestly, a lot of them just do it for their own pleasure. And some of them are professional like readers and actors. It's really cool. Any content is available through electronic Braille. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I'm guessing our audience really doesn't need this information. But one of the new things that is done through the National Library Service, which the Wisconsin Talking Book and Braille Library is a part of, is now they loan Braille displays and e-readers, so you can read Braille, borrow it and download Braille to read with you. So it's cool. It's kind of like a little Braille tablet. Mm-hmm. So anyway, the membership is free to all qualifying individuals. The reason I'm bringing it up is it's not just for blind, and they have, the National Library Service has, maybe almost 2 years ago, they really broadened the type of patrons that qualify for their services. You can have a physical disability, a reading disability, or any sort of other physical disability, and your certifying personnel can now include school psychologists, reading specialists, where that was not the case before. Before, you had to prove that you had an organic disability, not a non-organic disability. And that's like a whole lot more language than you really kind of want to get involved in. But the point is that there are a lot, because of these new guidelines, they've more than doubled the number of patrons that qualify for their services. The last one that's kind of an AMP, we're going back to the AMPs, sort of an AMP, I guess, is the Wisconsin Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. I'm kind of an expert on this because I kind of work here. So many AIM services are provided to the public, private, and home schools and agencies through the Wisconsin Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. We provide a lot of different services, including a central depository of Braille and large print materials and textbooks, some K-12 materials and educational materials for qualifying people, and we have textbook research and information and referral. So we don't provide them as much as we will help you find where to get them. So if you want to work with the WCBVI AIM Center, we might not be able to produce the book for you, but we can put you in touch with someone who can. That's the important thing. So here's the real kicker. If you want to use our services, as soon as you know what classes your students are taking the next year, do it a full year in advance and put in the request for your textbooks. Find out what they are and put them in a year advance, because here's the kicker. A new Braille textbook can take a full year from start to finish if it hasn't been transcribed before. It's a very tedious process, especially when we're talking about math or science. And large print can take a month. So don't wait too long, or you're not going to meet your requirements. You're not going to meet the free and appropriate public education requirement. So that's just something to keep in mind. The textbooks that you might need for Braille readers are available from APH using what we're going to call quota funds. If there are students that qualify for quota, which means it's federal dollars that the student or district is entitled to because they are blind or meet the definition of blindness, and textbooks can be purchased using these funds. I bet you didn't know this. Textbooks can be upwards of $30,000 to $50,000 for a Braille textbook, a single Braille textbook. And if it's math, you're talking the upper end of the range. So it's very spendy. So this funding that's available can really help districts out. So it's really important to know. If you want a book, or you question whether you want to use the WCBVI AIM library to find a book, here's a very useful flow chart, and I'm not going to go through it just because we're getting low on time and it's kind of complex. But basically, if you have a question, you can contact the WCBVI AIM Center. And I don't think I put the email address in there, but I'll tell you what it is. It's aem@wcbvi.k12.wi.us, and they can answer any questions that you might have. Yeah, we still have the long email address, sorry. So some basic tips that we talked about before. Once your textbook request is complete, you're going to receive contact information for any vendor that's listed that has the book that you're looking for. The vendors listed that carry the text from APH to let you know whether it's available on quota, but with using those quota dollars we talked about. This is a resource only. We don't actually order the textbook for you. You have to order it, and more importantly, pay for it on your own. But we will help you do the research because we know it's kind of daunting. We do have a website, and you can click on that link to check it out. We do have recreational reading options as well. We have a media specialist. Her name is Michelle Ruckert. She's a very nice lady, and she will loan you books in Braille. They have what's called twin vision books. So it's really cool. You have like the picture and the print as well as the Braille next to it. So if your student is learning to read Braille, you can help them along by reading the print along with them. It's really cool. There's also lots of different kinds of Braille books that we have available, magazines, large print things. Definitely look at the online catalog, that there should be a link here, and you can definitely check it out, or email Michelle.
And then, so thank you, Amy, for that. And to kind of just recap there. So again, if it's a student, as Amy's been talking about, and there's in particular the student with the, that it would require Braille or the large print, WBCI's AIM Center is a great place to go for resources with that if you need assistance, as Amy has mentioned. For the Wisconsin AIM Center, let's say you are looking for, first of all, let's just say you're looking for a textbook in Bookshare and you can't find it, and it's a resource that you need. You can contact the Wisconsin AIM Center, and the website is there, and you can do a request where you put in, this is a title I need, along with the other accompanying information. And Donna Hudson, who is our statewide coordinator for the NIMAC, can actually reach out. She can request the book, and it would come in a file to her, which she'd pass along to you. So, or if you're just brand new, again, I'm brand new to all of this, I need some technical support, can you help us out? Absolutely. But I want to make clear that, for example, Bookshare, Learning Ally, you don't need to go through the Wisconsin AIM Center to get those resources, right? You can sign up, as Amy's gone through, the district account, you can sign up through the individual account. But here at the Wisconsin AIM Center, we're happy to support and help in any way that we can. But Donna's information is up there as well. And in addition, there's a how to submit a request video on the website to kind of help guide you through that process. And I know we're kind of running low on time, but Amy, if you wouldn't mind, could you just talk about for a minute just why one would choose Bookshare, like the advantage of Bookshare features versus Learning Ally? Just kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I can sure do that. So Bookshare, what's nice, every kid, we talked about earlier, is every kid has their own learning modalities. Some kids have to see the print. Even though they have a decoding issue, it helps keep their attention. It helps them to track what's going on. It focuses them. So if that's what you need, then Bookshare might be the way to go. If you really want the access to the print, you can have it read aloud as well, but having that be an option is often what kids are looking for. If you want it in Braille, same rule applies. Then definitely Bookshare, because they have it in the various file formats. If it's important for your student, and some students are like this, they cannot listen to synthesized voices. They just can't. And sometimes it's an attention thing. Sometimes it's just one of those sensory things that annoys them, and they just can't. So for that reason, that might be a time when Learning Ally is most appropriate and helpful for them. So that's one way one reason you might pick one over the other. The main thing that I see is students say, I won't listen to synthesized text, I won't. And that's when, that's the biggest thing I see. But some people, they really have to have that written thing in front of them, whether it's on a tablet or on a Braille display.
Thank you, Amy, for that. I appreciate that. And it kind of tees up nicely. On our December 12th webinar from DPI, that one is focusing on like what type of AIM is needed. How do you determine that? How do you know if you should go, so that's really going to be the focus of that webinar on December 12th. So I encourage you to attend that as well. So again, as I've already gone through the titles of these are the resources there. The link is published for the first one, AIM in Wisconsin, Are You Ready? All the webinars are 4 to 5 p.m. and they will be updated, and the links should be developed soon, and they will be on the AT Forward's webpage, which is on our next slide. So those links, we have our AT Forward Community of Practice, and that link will take you to the homepage, and in there you'll see there's free micro-credentialing around assistive technology, which is awesome for families, for students, for educators, for anybody that's interested in AT. and that's free micro-credentialing, your digital certificate. But new this year, we launched a micro-credential in AIM specifically, so there's a resource. We also have community of practice meetings. The next one I believe is scheduled for next week, but you can find on there, the AIM webinars will be listed in those, so you'll find those there. We have our AT video resource library, which includes some videos on AIM. And it's what's really nice about this resource library. It's divided into topic, and under each topic, their clips are chunked into like 15-minute type sub clips, for lack of a better word, I guess, chunks, so that they're easily digestible and not an overwhelming amount of information. And then in addition, we do have a monthly AT update that goes out, like a newsletter with new resources and highlights different topics each month. And lastly on there, we have the AIM resources links there for you. So there's the National Center on AIM, and then we talked about the Wisconsin AIM Center, WCBVI AIM Center, Bookshare, Learning Ally, those links are there for you. So again, we recognize there was a lot of information coming your way today to kind of just lay the foundation and encourage you to contact us with any questions, and we'll do a check-in on those, and then also to attend and stay tuned for those updates coming from DPI.
Well, thank you both. Yes, in fact, there's lots of information, and I'm sure lots of information that those that are participating in today's webinar can definitely use. We do have a couple of questions, if you don't mind, just closing out with a couple of them. One was, what happens if a person is no longer in school but wants to access some of this material, and that they've been maybe diagnosed with some visual impairments after leaving school and are progressing to having to use like individuals who have, low vision help?
I can address that one. There are organizations in the state that can help. What I always recommend to people is they take a look at your local Office for the Blind and Visually Impaired, OBVI. Each county, I believe, has its own OBVI office, and they have rehab counselors and people that can help you. Another great resource is Wisconsin Council of the Blind in Madison. Yes, their initials, the acronym is WCBVI, and yes, it gets confused with the school a lot, but they're a great resource, and their AT specialist is Jim Denham, and I know he could totally help with anything that's related to accessing books or materials or things like that. They have great staff.
Okay, the next question we have is directed to Amy, and that's, why do you choose Voice Dream Reader over some of the others?
That's a good question. I really like the variety of, and granted, some of the other ones have caught up, and I guess you know how they have brand loyalty. Voice Dream was one of the first ones that provided really good Braille support, for one thing. And they also they were also some of the first ones to provide a wide range of low vision supports, like for colors and background. And not that I'm saying you should have purple text on a hot pink background, but you could. Sometimes it's all about whatever you can get a kid to buy in, and I like some of the voices are nice. You can purchase some of the advanced voices for not too expensive. I think I bought a voice one time because I didn't like the default one. I think it was like $7 or $8. And to be honest with you, if you can get a kid to listen to a voice and all you pay is $7 or $8, that's a bargain. It's cheap. And I guess that's why I prefer that one. But again, there's always new ones coming out. So like I said, brand loyalty.
Well, thank you. And there's one last question, and that is that you both have talked about documentation a lot for if you qualify. What kinds of documentation is necessary for a parent to bring with them to like an IEP meeting, or to, go to a helper to show them that, yes, in fact, this person has a visual disability?
Oh, a visual disability in particular, or a disability that's qualified?
For that matter, for the ones that you talked that maybe they would qualify for.
So I'm going to start and then I'm going to hand it over to Amy with the visual. So just in general, just to make this really clear, when IEP teams are meeting, there is no formal documentation that the parent needs to bring in for the print disability qualification. The IEP team can make that determination based on the team's, as you kind of walk through again, those 4 qualifying indicators, right? And now that that's changed, that we have the special ed teacher can make that eligibility, there's not necessarily for a reason to bring in documentation. And I mean, never hurts to have it, but right. And then Amy, do you want to talk, do you have anything you want to add in terms of?
Well, you know, the thing is, like, if you want to apply for Bookshare on your own as a parent, to provide, you know, an individual Bookshare account, for a vision impairment, it just is a simple, you can even, like, if you have a special ed team, if you even just ask your special ed teacher, hey, could you help my student give them a letter for Bookshare or whatever. I mean, really, it's not a big process. Like Stacy said, the IEP team determines. And then you kind of go from there. If the parent has questions, there's, you know, definitely go to the case manager or the team, or look at just make sure that everything is appropriately documented in the IEP. That's a really important thing. At your next IEP meeting, just make sure.
Well, thank you both so very much. We've run over a minute or so right now, so we appreciate all of the information that you were able to give to us, and I'm sure everybody if they have other questions, is it appropriate to contact either of you with their questions?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yep, that's why our contact information is there.
Okay, well, thank you both so very much. Because we're over time right now, we'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and especially thank you, Amy and Stacy, for all the information in the webinar. Please be reminded that Wisconsin Facets has over 80 scheduled trainings and webinars for 2022 and now 2023. Please feel free to check out our website calendar and register for any of those upcoming trainings that may be of interest to you. And also please watch for the short evaluation that will be coming your way after today's live presentation. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Thank you to our presenters. Everybody have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.